Hello, everyone, and thank you for participating in the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Joe Diaz. I'm a managing partner at Lytham Partners. For this presentation, we welcome Humanigen, which trades on the Nasdaq exchange under the ticker symbol HGEN. Representing Humanigen today is Tim Morris, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. Tim will run through a slide presentation, and we will engage in a brief fireside Q&A session afterwards. Before we begin, for those not familiar, Lytham Partners is one of the country's leading investor relations firm. With more than 2 decades of corporate access experience, we've built one of the industry's most diverse and effective platforms for connecting small cap companies with high quality and focused institutional investors. One final item before we begin, I want to remind everyone that Tim will be available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, please visit the Lytham Partners website at lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meetings request button. With that said, let me turn the proceedings over to Tim Morris, COO and CFO of Humanigen. Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe, and really appreciate the opportunity to present first time at your conference. So we're looking forward to speaking with you and with some of your clients. I'm going to share my screen now and go through a series of slides. Again, Tim Morris, I am the CFO of Humanigen. I've been with the company now in this role coming up on 2 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the board of directors for about 4 years. So I've been with the company and the management team for a long time. I will make some forward-looking statements as soon as my slides continue, which they seem to not be continuing. So, here we go. So please refer to all of my SEC documents for risk that will impact your investment decision. Let me just give you a brief overview of Humanigen and LENZ itself. Lenzilumab is a monoclonal antibody. It's an immunomodulator. It was discovered and developed and will be commercialized by Humanigen. We believe it's variant agnostic and that it works on the host, not on the virus itself. I think that's important in this day and age when we've now seen multiple mutations of the virus. We do believe that this potentially could offer a future-proof treatment against the current BA.2 variant and inevitable future variants. So we think that's in the treatment paradigm. There's a lot of effort focused on the virus itself. This actually focuses on the body's reaction to the virus. We believe that COVID-19 will become an endemic disease, will continue to impact society and healthcare systems and patients. When I think we first started this journey, everyone thought this might be a flash in the pan, but safe to say, we think it's here to stay. We do think it'll be more like the flu. We do think that obviously with vaccinations and other treatments, there will be breakthrough and there still will be plenty of patients who are going to need treatment. LENZ has shown to be an effective therapeutic, which has demonstrated a significant benefit over and above standard of care, which includes, as I'll show you, remdesivir, steroids, and anything else that folks are being treated with these days. And the safety profile is very clean and comparable to placebo. We do think that LENZ is a very nice commercial opportunity. We think it can save thousands of lives. We think it can generate billions of dollars in recurring revenue and offer healthcare systems in the US and around the world a cost-effective medicine. We have some data on that as well. And then lastly, we had previously been studying LENZ and continue to study LENZ in other important indications, including CAR-T therapy, as a way to protect against neurotoxicity and cytokine storm, and also an acute graft versus host disease. So I'll touch on those in a minute. We do want to pause to look at the date. I'm sure people are getting tired of statistics here, but just to date, we're now 3 months into this year, approaching 1 million hospitalizations with over 151,000 deaths. Kind of a snapshot, and we continue to update this, but this is a life to date since COVID, again, approaching 1 million deaths, over 4 million hospitalizations. And this is in spite of the fact that 77% of the folks have had at least one vaccine. A little bit surprising that the second dose and the booster doses aren't as high as they should be. We do continue to see hospitalizations with folks who are unvaccinated or haven't had their second dose or their booster. So we think that opportunity will exist. From a clinical trial standpoint, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail, we've got 5 active studies going at the present time. Active 5 is a trial that fully enrolled in January. It's sponsored by NIH. We do anticipate that the data from this study should be out sometime in the second quarter. C-SMART is a study we have ongoing in immunocompromised patients. Product has been shipped to Australia where the trial is being taken place, and a trial hopefully will begin soon. There's a study ongoing in Korea, a PK study through our partner. Not only has that product been shipped, but they've dosed a couple of patients to date. They only need about 20 there. SHIELD is a study in CAR-T. That protocol is now with the FDA. We do anticipate the first patient to be dosed in the second quarter. And the rating study is the GVHD study. Again, we anticipate the first patient to be dosed here in the second quarter. From a regulatory standpoint, we've actually been able to make good progress, I think, with the US FDA. We recently held a pre-EUA meeting with them. And we anticipate that we're on the same page. That meeting was mainly around agreeing to the statistical methods and analysis and the data that will be completed for the study. In the UK, we have a rolling review. One of the questions they asked was for a validation of the manufacturing process. That's been completed for the bulk drug, and we're literally finishing the final fill in order to do validation for the fill finish operation. And in the EU, we've been allocated a slot to submit the full CMA in the third quarter. From an access to program, we actually have a managed access program up and running through Humanigen. The product is now available, and we believe we'll get reimbursement in 16 countries. And then we recently signed a deal with a company called Cenexi to help us with some of our initiatives in France, and also to be a potential fill finish manufacturer for all of Europe. These are the clinical trials that we have ongoing for COVID. LiveAir, has been completed. That was 520 patients. I'll show some data from that in a second, predominantly in the US, but there were some sites in Brazil. The second study, Active 5, has been initiated and completed, paid for all by NIH. What's important to note here is that we took the learnings from the first phase 3 study, LiveAir, and found that the set of patients that actually respond best to the treatment are those with the C-reactive protein or CRP level less than 150. CRP is a very simple biomarker. It's a marker of inflammation that all patients who are hospitalized will get. What we found on a quartile analysis is that those patients with the CRP less than 150 respond best. And so we took that information, went back to the NIH, and they modified their trial, even though it was ongoing. You can do it on a prospective basis because it's still blinded, to limit the inclusion criteria to this set of patients here, but more importantly, to change the primary analysis patient population for the protocol to look at patients that have CRP less than 150. So we think in this case, the trial is designed for success, and we're treating the patients who respond the best. C-SMART is a study that is looking to go enroll in Australia. Again, studying an immunomodulator in immune-compromised patients is important. This isn't a registrational trial, but it will clearly help as we go for full approval and as we go for full use around the world. And then lastly, as I mentioned, our partners in Korea have already enrolled in the study in Korea to do a PK bridging study. This is a set of the trials that are non-COVID. So the SHIELD study is looking at use with CAR-T treatments, specifically Yescarta and Tecartus. That's a study that we're looking to enroll about 160 patients in. and we anticipate the first patient dose should be the first half of this year. That is going to be a US only run study with about 30 sites. The rating study is going to be paid for and run by the Impact Group. That's a series of transplant centers in the UK. We're looking for 240 patients there. And again, looking to treat patients who've been diagnosed and are at high risk for acute graft versus host disease. Pre-GEM, a little bit different here. This is actually a trial using Lenzilumab in a condition known as chronic myelomonocytic leukemia, a condition where the overproduction of myeloid cells leads to leukemia. And these patients, we've already been dosed here, and that's again being sponsored by some groups down in Australia. Lastly, we do have another monoclonal here, IFAB. We are looking at to use that as an antibody drug conjugate and planning to do a basket study in some sites down in Australia. The data from Live Air, which was the first 3 COVID study, has been published in Lancet, was published in December. The full article and the commentary and all the tables are available online using the QR codes shown on your screen. A couple of interesting quotes that we pulled out we just want to share. Basically, the conclusion of the trial that Lenzilumab can improve the likelihood of survival without the need for mechanical ventilation, with a safety profile similar to that of placebo. So the endpoint here was, are you alive and or not on a ventilator after day 28? And we showed that clearly over and above the standard of care. Most importantly, and when we talk about positioning, most of our patients here were on room air or low flow. A lot of the treatments that are out there are usually for patients that are either already ventilated, which is bad, or in high flow, which is the next step prior to ventilation. So from a positioning standpoint, we believe that Lenzilumab should be used immediately when patients are hospitalized and their oxygen falls below 94%. And then lastly, just to follow on the theme that we have with using CRP, the article does mention that looking at CRP as a way to screen for patients is important. It's been published now that CRP has a very good correlation to disease severity. And so we do think that this is the right way to approach treatment. The data itself is shown here. What you're looking at is a hazard ratio. The hazard ratio looks at the difference between the active group, which is going to be the percent of patients here that progress to death or mechanical ventilation, 15% versus 22% from a standard of care. Hazard ratio there is 1.54. What that means in layman's terms is that you have a 54% better chance of surviving without ventilation with LENZ than without LENZ. And remember, the placebo here is really standard of care. So it most likely includes remdesivir, includes all other treatments, includes steroids. And so we're really showing a benefit over and above. Now, the next 2 data points are important as we went back and looked at on a retrospective basis, a set of patients who had a CRP level less than 150. And again, this was still about 70% of the patients in our study. We looked at that and we saw a very dramatic difference here. And the hazard ratio goes from 1.54 to 3.04. Also, more importantly, when you look at a set of patients who all had a background of remdesivir, and the Active-5 study includes remdesivir in 100% of the patients. In the Live Air study, that wasn't a requirement, but it is a requirement here in the Active-5. The hazard ratio goes to 3.43. So again, with a highly significant p-value here, as you know, anything less than 0.05 should be statistically significant, but we are seeing extreme use in these last 2 groups. So this is the set of patients, this last column here, that we're studying for Active-5. And so we do anticipate that we should see a good result. A couple of other things that we've seen in this group from an economic standpoint is it really saves the system cost and effort and resources. So whatever metric you want to use, whether it's hospital days, whether it's ICU days, or mechanical ventilation days, you can all see that this group saves a significant amount, whether it's 2, 3, or 3. Again, and this equates to fairly nice savings. Our pharmacoeconomic work, which is now published, estimated that we can save in the US about $13,000 per course of treatment for each patient. We've also looked at a couple of other secondary endpoints, one being the reduction in IMV, ECMO, or death at about 12.5%. And then the last one is interesting. It's fairly technical. It's numbers needed to treat. So how many patients do I need to treat to save one life? In this case, it's 14. That's a very low number. And so again, I think it shows the power that we have with Lenzilumab in this particular patient population. From a positioning standpoint, as I mentioned, there are a number of drugs out there that are approved. A lot of folks talk about antibodies or neutralizing antibodies, and does Lenzilumab compare to that? No, all of the neutralizing antibodies are antivirals. Those are really meant for pre-hospital patients. It's really meant to prevent hospitalization. We have seen now with variants that a number of these antibodies are no longer in use. The US government came out and banned the use of the latest one from GSK in about eight states because of the mutations and BA2. The oral antivirals are available, but we're not sure what that use is going to be. The point is that anything in this category is really used pre-hospital, not approved in the hospital. Once you get in the hospital, if you are on high flow, you can get baricitinib, you can get tocilizumab, you can also get steroids or dexamethasone. Remdesivir is used for patients that are on low flow. But we think the opportunity for Lenzilumab is, again, patients that are admitted, have an oxygen saturation below 94, and are in room air, so you can treat immediately. We also have shown some data from the live air study that the earlier you treat, the better your chances are for success. Switching gears real quickly now to the CAR-T study. So we had done some previous work with Yescarta, looking at Lenzilumab as a way to reduce cytokine storm. We had published that data, I think, about a year ago, and showed that at the recommended dose, there was a 100% success rate. What you're going to measure here in this particular study is you are going to look at cytokine storm, but the primary endpoint is going to be neurotoxicity as defined by immune effector cell-associated neurotoxicity, or ICANS. There's a scale here. There isn't any treatment that's available right now. One of the unfortunate side effects of CAR-T therapy is neurotoxicity, which then leads to rehospitalization, which then leads to patients, the drug and the treatment not working as effectively as it should. So we are going to measure this. Patients here are going to be given Lenzilumab prior to giving their CAR-T treatment. We are going to then study them through day 60, looking at a reduction and making sure that there are no grade 2 or above ICANS events. And then we will continue to follow these patients on a 6-month pattern, really to see, we believe we can also help the efficacy and the duration of the CAR-T therapy, and that's measured kind of in 6-month increments. So that's a study that we will pay for ourselves. Again, the protocol's with the FDA. It should be finalized. We've identified sites and anticipate dosing a patient here before the end of the second quarter. The other study that is ready to enroll the first patient is in study in graft versus host disease. It's a similar to what's happening in CAR-T treatment. This is a stem cell transplant. A lot of patients here, if you have acute graft versus host disease, essentially what the body is doing is rejecting that stem cell. The current standard of care these days is steroids. However, a fair amount of patients are steroid refractory. So using a set of biomarkers referred to as the MAGIC algorithm developed by Mount Sinai, we're going to screen patients and to put them in 2 categories. If you're low risk, you just go against standard of care. If you're high risk for having a steroid refractory, you will receive Lenzilumab plus steroids. Again, this is a study that was selected. We was a competitive event where they selected Lenzilumab. It's going to be ready for enrollment here relatively soon, and we anticipate announcing that sometime in the second quarter. Looking at the last study we have, again, PreChem is a phase 2/3 study being run in Australia. CMML is a relatively rare disease. What we found to date is that there are a set of patients who are at high risk for certain KRAS mutations here, and we found that Lenzilumab can be effective. So we're running a full study here on top of chemotherapy, azacitidine, where patients will be randomized. If you're at high risk for a disease with a KRAS mutation, then you'll get Lenzilumab. If you're at low risk, you'll just get standard of care. Again, we're going to measure standard oncology endpoints here and looking at the primary endpoints of complete response or partial response at 12 months. Another study, I think it's enrolled about 3 patients to date, and look forward to continuing enrollment here this year. Overall, just in kind of summary here, we have 3 sets of goals. From a regulatory standpoint, I think the active 5 that B results are important. We then will take those, assuming active 5 is positive, file an amendment to the FDA for EUA. We also will include that information in our response to the UK authority, the MHRA, that had asked for some additional work. First patient dosed or first patient injected here will be for SHIELD, for rating, and CSMART. And we've already checked the last box here recently with dosing patients in the PK study in Korea. From a publication standpoint and some other important items, we have published the results from the economic analysis in a peer-reviewed journal. The LENZ map portal is now live, so patients in 16 countries can get access to the product. In Europe, we do plan to have a peer-reviewed publication of the CRP data, and also to have a peer-reviewed publication of the economic data from a UK perspective, using UK estimates for cost of treatment. So with that, I will end the slideshow here, and please visit our website if you have any more information. So back to you, Joe.
Tim, thank you for that overview. Really appreciate it. Great information. Let's talk about a few topics here. How quickly after you receive the data from the active study will you be prepared to submit an amendment to your emergency use authorization with the FDA?
Yeah, that's it's hard to give a specific timeline, but in our case, by example, last year when we had top-line data, we then were able to submit the application, the full application, within 2 months. In this case, it's actually just an amendment, so it probably makes sense that we should be under that guideline. So, look for it relatively quickly after top-line data is released.
Yeah. With regards to manufacturing, who will be the primary manufacturer in the U.S.? And do you have plans to manufacture outside of the United States?
Yeah, most of the work to date has been done with U.S. manufacturers. When we first started in COVID, that was a requirement if there was going to be any government. So we have fully validated and qualified Catalent as our primary producer. We have 2 sites, one in Madison, one in Bloomington, at different scales, using both single-use and stainless steel. We've also used Catalent as our fill-finish manufacturer. So they will be the dominant manufacturer. I do have a group where I'm transferring the technology in China called Chime Biologics. They should be able to manufacture for the rest of the world. As I mentioned, I've got an agreement with Cenexi to do fill-finish in the UK. I've also been working with a German company to potentially make bulk drug in Germany, as well as we progress for our efforts in Europe. But for right now, we'll supply everyone from the US.
Right. Leveraging off of that question, how many doses do you think can be produced in the first year after an authorization? And how does that compare with plans for subsequent years?
Yeah, I have right now, I've been working on this for about the last 2 years, and I spent $150 million last year in manufacturing alone. I have available about 85,000 doses. And that will be, depending on where we get approval first, I can use that. I do have the ability to secure additional manufacturing, particularly with one of the sites I've mentioned up in with Catalent, but we haven't yet as of committed to a certain number of production because we're waiting for the data from Active 5 before we make a big financial commitment. So our goal always is to have about 100,000 treatments. That's how we think about the world. 100,000 treatments available for the US and probably some subset of that for either the UK, Europe, or the rest of the world. So that's our goals. Remember, it's not a vaccine, so we don't need millions, and again, we think about 100,000 should be sufficient.
Sure. You have plans to use a lens in multiple markets. How, if at all, does that impact potential pricing considerations?
My favorite topic. I'm of the belief that we can have one world, one price. I know that's a challenging argument to make, especially in certain countries where that concept just doesn't exist. But I guess two things. We've shown, obviously, in the US and in the UK, and we'll do it in Europe, the savings to the healthcare systems will well exceed the price of the drug. Some analysts have considered using a price of about $10,000. Again, my economic study shows I can save $13,000, so there's clearly a net savings there. I can't produce enough drug for all countries in the world, including those who probably can't afford it. So it's unfortunate, but we do want to maintain kind of pricing throughout all the territories.
Sure. Which of your non-COVID indications is most exciting from a clinical and a commercial perspective?
Boy, I guess it'd probably answer that two ways. There hasn't really been anything exciting and new for graft versus host disease, and that's, while it's a small indication, I think that's something that, these patients have a high mortality rate. And so I think that, to me, would be interesting. But that's going to be a little bit longer term. CAR-T, we've shown in a very small number of patients that it works very effectively. And that's a program that, potentially once we get up and running, we might have some initial look from a data standpoint. CAR-T therapy works. Emily Whitehead wouldn't be alive today without it. And so, there are so many CAR-T players out there. And I know that when people look at CAR-T, that therapy just hasn't taken on, mainly because of the side effect profile. So if we're able to show that we can reduce neurotoxicity and cytokine storm, we think that the increase in all the CAR-T therapies, should be great. And so those are the two things that are exciting to me.
Well, Tim, we'll have to leave it there. We've reached the end of our time. Thank you so much for all the information. Sounds like some really exciting time at the company coming forward. So thank you. We greatly appreciate it.
No problem, John.
To anyone out there that has not already signed up for a one-on-one with Tim, again, please visit the Lytham Partners website at lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meetings request button. We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Everyone, have a great day. Again, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity. Have a good day.